Hi, my name is Easter. Welcome to the Easter Basket. And today I really wanted to address perks. And in particular, I wanted to address the most recent killer perks, though the same sort of trend holds true for survivors. And I wanted to address the most recent perk redoings for Billy and Leatherface because it shows both a positive trend and a negative trend. So I wanted to address these. We'll go through them now. So I'll bring up what the perks for Billy and Leatherface currently do. So we'll start with Franklin's Demise. Currently, Franklin's Demise just simply makes survivors drop their items and they lose 5% durability at max rank. Now, over here for Franklin's Demise, the lost item will be consumed by the entity after 120, 100, or 90 seconds. If it is not picked up before the timer runs out, it still makes them drop the item. And it reveals the aura of items on the ground within 32 meters, a white aura. So functionally, I like this perk because this is a anti-key perk. So now if you see a key in the lobby, you can simply equip Franklin's Demise, throw that on there, and then make the person with the key drop the key and simply make sure that nobody picks it up. Or if you can simply make them drop it and guard it, then they won't be able to pick it up. For Knockout, it prevents other survivors from seeing the knocked out survivor when they're standing outside of the 32, 24, 16 meter range. This new Knockout also prevents them from crawling at the regular speed. They also crawl 50% slower for 15 seconds. And while they are crawling, they are affected by the blindness status effect, so they can't see the auras of other survivors. Again, I wouldn't say it's very good, but it's a unique niche perk if a slug build is what you're going for. Now, I don't really advocate slug builds because they're not very interesting, but it is a very interesting niche perk. Now, we'll go over Lightborn and Tinker, and then we'll discuss trends. So, Lightborn, currently, it allows whoever equips it to resist blindness by 60, 70, 80%, and increases your recovery rate from blindness by 50%, which is functionally immunity. If somebody tries to blind you, they're going to realize very, very quickly that you have Lightborn, and it's just not going to work. It's functionally a perk that's useless because it's only ever going to happen once, and that you can mitigate by simply playing differently. So it's not really very useful. New Lightborn makes you completely immune to blindness, and survivors that attempt blinding you have their aura revealed for 6, 8, 10 seconds. So if you're someone who, say, lags a lot, and it's really hard, or maybe you don't have very good hearing, it's hard for you to tell if a survivor's in the area, if they have a flashlight, then maybe you can simply equip this as a quality of life. It's a neat little quality of life perk. If you're somebody who doesn't like playing around blindness, if you're somebody who really just doesn't like flashlights, you can throw it on and completely ignore that aspect of what survivors are capable of with the items that they bring in. Tinker, now Tinker is my favorite. As for general perks that could be really useful, currently it's simply a numbers change. So when a generator is repaired to 70% repair progress, excuse me, this is a change down from 85%. Triggers a loud noise notification. You are granted the undetectable status effect for 12, 14, and 16 seconds. And this is up from 8, 10, and 12 seconds. So this is a significant buff. So the reason that Tinker isn't very useful now is because at 85%, by the time it triggers, it's already almost done. So if you're already chasing somebody, by the time you turn, by the time you find out that Tinker triggers, unless you're right on the gen, it's one of those duels at the end of the game for the last gen in a 3-gen. Unless it's that very specific niche situation, it just doesn't apply, really. The current Tinker just isn't worth using because by the time you get information out of it, the information isn't really as applicable as it should be. Now, for the undetectable status effect going up, this is what I really like about it, because if you're across the map and you're on Billy, since this is one of his perks, and you hear this going off, if you're on a high mobility killer, if you're on who else could use this? Nurse still screams, so it's not quite as useful on her. Though if she is chasing somebody, she can turn a chase, and if they're not in a group, then Tinker could be useful for her as well. But on Billy, on high mobility, on high mobility killers, you could you could use this as a really effective both ambush and information perk. So I really like this perk. Now, why are these perks important? They're important because they're all useful niche perks for something, right? You could easily picture a build in which you use all of these perks or a situation. So the contrast that I want to make with this video is comparing it to the most recent killer perks. Because the most recent killer perks, for the most part, are either insufferably niche or they're just fucking awful. And I don't like having to see a new killer come out, a new list of perks comes out, and there's a slight exception in the case of the newest Survivor perk with Soul Guard, in which Soul Guard is, again, a niche useful perk, kind of like Nemesis for Oni was. But the most recent perks for Pyramid Head in particular, 2 of these are just completely useless. They are useful in no situations, and I'm going to go over which one of the 2 of these 3 are. The first one is obviously Force Penance. Those who stand in the way of duty will suffer farce judgment. Survivors who take a protection hit are inflicted with a broken status effect for 40, 50, 60 seconds. What situation is this going to be useful? Because if they take a protection hit, they're wounded. So if you want to go after them in the time that this applies, they're not going to be able to heal themselves. So why is this relevant? This is the situation in which this applies is so niche that it doesn't matter. Which is if somebody pops takes a protection hit and then pops a anti-hemorrhagic syringe, or gets for the people. That's really the only situations in which this applies. So there is no situation in which any killer can fit this into a build and have it be even the simplest amount of useful in a normal game. So it's garbage. And the second one is Deathbound. Those whose lives are intertwined in darkness are destined to suffer together. When a survivor heals another survivor for 1 health state at least 32 meters away from the killer, the survivor performing the healing action will scream, revealing their location and activating Deathbound for the next 60 seconds. During that time, the survivors will suffer from the Oblivious status effect when farther from 16, 12, 8 meters away from the healed survivor. So this is supposedly is not a word, supposedly a information perk for 1, but it only works from at least 32 meters away, which isn't very useful, especially when compared to Barbecue and Chili that simply just reveals everyone when you hook someone. Not even close. And it also reveals their location, and this Oblivious status effect when farther away from the survivor, the intention, I assume, is that it's to keep the survivors together, which is not really the Oblivious status effect is not a severe enough status effect to deal with. Now, a useful thing, I think, is that if you inflicted Broken on them when they were outside of the aura of outside of that area of the healed survivor, I think that would be interesting. But I think that would cause too many problems with the killer medals, because if you have somebody running in and out of the Broken area, then the killer medal that relies on survivors and not healing themselves would probably just completely break. It probably wouldn't take this perk into effect, and it just wouldn't work. It would make killers never rank up because that emblem would be broken. Now, there is one that could be useful though, and that's Trail of Torment. So you guide your victims along a path of pain and punishment. After kicking a generator, you become undetectable for 16 seconds. During this time, the generator's aura is revealed in yellow, and it can only be triggered once every 80, 70, or 60 seconds. Okay, this is useless as long as the generator is revealed in yellow. So hundreds and hundreds of people have already emphasized this. Streamers abound have said this. But as long as the aura is revealed in yellow, it's useless. If they took that away, it would actually be a pretty fun perk to run for some people. If you were, say, Pop Freddy might be useful for it, though it wouldn't affect his lullaby. Nurse could be pretty funny with it if she takes Pop. Making her undetectable would be pretty entertaining. I'm a Nurse main, so half of the things that I think of apply to Nurse. Demogorgon could be useful because you could fake out a travel, potentially. but it's still, there aren't really any perks, and I'll look at Deathslinger's perks here too. There aren't really any perks uh, released in the past several killers that are just unanimously good. Nemesis is good because it plays off a perk called Play with Your Food that's from Michael Myers, you know, a year and a half ago. And this trend is worrying to me because there's this constant sort of hype cycle when it comes to the release of a new killer where all killers go, oh man, how good is the new killer going to be? Is the killer going to be fun to play? Are the perks going to be good? And you notice that are the perks going to be good are always at the tail end because everybody knows that the perks are going to be shit. Because the developers seem to not want to supplant old perks with new ones to have a sort of pay to win aspect to the game, which is admirable. But maybe they should look at the shrine. They should look at maybe allowing blood points to be used in reverse to stock up on targeted perks that people want. Maybe there should be mechanisms in place to allow people to get perks to take away from this pay to win aspect that could come into play. This pay to win worry if developers make new perks good. And admittedly, the situation in which a new perk is broken, which given the history of Dead by Daylight is entirely possible, if it's broken and it allows killers to do things that they should absolutely not be able to do, like if there's one that prevents survivors from being able to DS them, as an example. Something that really allows them to play in an unhealthy manner. If a perk like that were released, I can understand. Because then people would get that perk, like would deliberately buy the DLC to get that perk. And that's a negative. Of course that's negative. But I want to be excited when a new perk releases for a killer. I really want that. And right now that's just impossible because all the new perks are shit, right? Back to before Oni. Let's see if I pull up a list of killers here. Dead by Daylight killers. And we go through the list of most recent killers, okay? We have Pyramid Head's perks, all shit or really niche. Deathslinger's perks, all shit or really niche. Oni's perks, Nemesis is usably niche, but only because it combines with Play with Your Food from way up here at Michael Myers. All the way right after Nurse was released. Demogorgon perks, also shit. Ghostface perks. Thrilling Tremors is good. So Ghostface is the most recent killer who you could consider has a usable perk. And Thrilling Tremors is something that unfortunately has to compete with Barbecue, which is indisputably the best killer perk in the game because of the value that it offers and the combined with the information that it offers. So Thrilling Tremors would be considered a good perk if it didn't have to compete with a perk back here that was much, much better, simply by virtue of existing. Which is a problem, right? The last killer who has several indisputably good perks is Plague, because she has Corrupt Intervention, which is used in an enormous amount of killer builds. And she also has Infectious Fright, which is also used in Oni builds. It's used in Michael Myers builds. It's used in several builds whose import. I also personally use it on Nurse. It's used in several builds for killers who are really good at escalating an advantage and snowballing a game to a victory. But after this, we have a 5 killer streak of perks who are just terrible. Or they're so niche, or they're overshadowed by previous killers' perks, like Barbecue and Chili. And this is a trend that I don't want to see continue. I want the next killer, whoever that killer is, gameplay, whether the gameplay is fantastic or not, I want their perks to be useful, and I want their perks to be fun. And if they go back and they change the Pyramid Head perk, if they go back and change Trail of Torment to remove this yellow aura, this could be a fun perk to use. So they're not out of the game by any means, but they should be able to do this. And the reason that I have a problem with this at this point is because these changes are fun, and they're usable, and they're reasonable. And at the end of the day, that's all I really have to say about that. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you learned something.